Okay, so next step for me is frequency separation. That sounds very intimidating, and I think people are often quite scared to do it, but it's actually super fast, and once you know how to set it up, it takes literally half a minute. So the first thing we have to do for that is to create a new layer, but it has to contain all the information from the layers below. So to do that, just stamp all the visible layers. There's a shortcut for that, which is Shift-Alt-Control-E, or if you're on a Mac, it's Shift-Option-Command-E. So there you go. I'm going to call this low frequency. I'm going to explain that in a minute. First, copy this layer. You just drag it down to this plus sign and call it high frequency. Okay, so what we do in frequency separation is to basically separate the texture in the photo, so the pores and the hair, the skin texture in general, or the details, and the color. So the low frequency layer contains the color and light and shade information, and the high frequency layer contains the details. To do this, you need to first check if you're working in 16 bits or 8 bits. You can see it here. I'm working in 16. So let's first pretend we're working in 8. I'm going to change the mode. Most of you, I think, will probably be working in 8 bits. It's more common. So now the way you would set up the frequency separation is that you first go onto the low frequency layer. Switch off the high frequency. We don't want to see that at the moment. So stay on the low frequency layer. Now go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And you want to drag the slider up until it blurs the details. So let's say gonna stick to around 10. That's usually a good value. Toggle this back on. Now go on to the high frequency layer. This is important. Don't stay on the low one. Go onto the high frequency layer. Go to Image, Apply Image. And now you're going to change this to low frequency layer. So the layer you blurred out, you might have named it something else, but it has to be the layer that you put the filter, the Gaussian blur filter on. Leave this as it is. Make sure that the invert box is unchecked. Here you want to select Subtract. And for the numbers, make sure it's 100%, 2, and 128. You kind of know it's going well when this is looking like that, gray and with a lot of detail. Click OK. And then stay on this layer and change the blend mode here to linear light. Okay, you can see now the photo looks exactly the same. So all we've done with the frequency separation is to basically divide the picture into 2 layers. One is this blurred out color information layer, and the other is this high frequency detail layer. But as long as you keep them together, the image looks exactly the same. The advantage of working in this way is that now you can work on the low frequency layer without affecting the texture and detail of the skin. Now, in case you might not remember, I was actually working in 16 bits, so I'm going to go back to where I was. Okay, so if you're working in 16 bits like me, we're going to do the process again. You just have to enter different values. So make sure you on the high frequency layer, go to Image, Apply Image. Make sure you got your low frequency layer selected here, the one you blurred. This time you need to check invert, so don't leave it like this, it has to be checked. Here you don't put subtract but add in this case. And you want to put the numbers to 100, 2 and 0. Click OK. And again change the blend mode here to linear light. Great. So we've set up our frequency separation. Now put those 2 layers in a folder. It will make it easier to work with them. So select both of those layers and drag them down here onto this folder icon. I'm going to call this frequency separation, no surprise. Okay, so and now the way to work with this, or the way I like to work with it, is that you're going to even out the skin tone. So you see, for example, here there's a very dark shadow. Here there's some kind of pigmentation I want to get rid of. I don't really love this under eye circle. So let's work on that now. The way I do this is that I select the low frequency layer. That's the one with the color information. Remember, the one we blurred out. Now add an extra layer on top, an empty one, just to keep things tidy and you don't need to work directly on this layer. And call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it color correction. Now you can leave this as is, but I like to switch off the high frequency layer for the moment because you can see better what you're doing. Then grab the brush tool here on the left. And now all you're going to be doing is sampling color from wherever you're painting and trying to even out the skin tone. Let me show you what I mean. I recommend you choose a very soft brush, so slide the hardness all the way to the left. This size is pretty good for now, and keep the flow quite low, which means that the brush isn't as reactive, and also keep the opacity fairly low. I might try 35. What you want to do is sample. For example, let's say I want to get rid of this under eye circle. So I'm going to sample with the brush in the maybe this area, which is a kind of median tone, and try to get rid of this. You can sample by simply clicking Option on a Mac or Alt on a Windows PC, and you can see that it then samples the color from wherever I'm having my mouse pointer. So in this case, I might sample from here and then just try to very gently brush over it. So you want to keep sampling from both sides, keep it fairly even, and just ever so slightly try to even this out. Now this looks a bit fake, but don't worry, we're going to switch back on the texture layer in a moment and see the result. So you want to be very delicate with this. Don't just do one big brush stroke and be done with it. This requires a bit of subtleness. Just going to do a bit more down here. And let's just now switch this back on. So you remember I worked on this bit and here. Let me show you what it looked like before. What a big difference. I'm not totally happy with it yet, so let me just redo it a little bit. So you're trying to make it look not fake, right? Which means you have to be a little bit careful how much you do this. So you can see that the before and after is quite extreme. For me, this is now a bit too much because it has started to look a bit fake, especially on the inner eye corner. So what I always do then is to lower the opacity of this color correction layer. Maybe let's try that. Looks pretty good to me. And still, if you change before and after, you still see a huge difference. That's how I use frequency separation.